Hello, everyone. You are listening to the DMZ America podcast for Wednesday, November 13th, 2023, 2024, actually. I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall, coming to you from the left. And if I sound a little flustered, it's because we just had a classic two wrongs make a right moment where we had really hard time getting our guest on. And now we have him. Then we had him. And just when the conversation started to go, after all these problems, we realized we weren't really live. So we're starting from scratch. But you missed all of the bumps in the road. So kind of consider yourself lucky, really. Anyway, so Scott.
I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right, by the way. It is the year 2024. It just feels like 1984. Let's bring our guest in right away. It's Ben Sargent. If you've heard that name, it's because Ben Sargent is a Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist. He began at the Austin American-Statesman during the Ford administration.
Yes.
Which I think is fantastic. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1982. He was a huge influence on my work. I want to bring that up later. Massive.
Flattering.
Oh, it destroyed my career. It was horrible, but it was great at the same time. I'll mention why in a moment. But you retired from the Austin American-Statesman, as did your wife, in 2009, and now you cartoon for the Texas Observer. Do I have all that right?
Observer, which is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It's a political magazine here in Texas that's been coming out since, I think, 1950 and comes out monthly.
It's excellent. It has a national reputation.
Yeah.
Very famous local magazine.
And, Molly Ivins was editor at one time, and that's probably the most famous editor we've had. And so I'm doing one cartoon a month, which is a very gentlemanly level of cartooning, I think, at this stage.
Well, you're a gentlemanly person.
It hasn't changed my deadline habits. I get like 2 days out. Oh shit! I've got to do a cartoon.
I was about to ask you because I stepped away from full-time work at the Tribune. I still draw 2 a week for them and draw for the Dallas Morning News and for CNN. But even that is like, it's still like, it doesn't have the same exactly. It doesn't have the same, I don't know how I can put this. It doesn't have the same daily grind, and I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. Like you,
very different. I mean, when you and I were doing daily cartoons, we knew that whatever we drew would be in the reader's hands the next morning. When I draw one for the Observer, the reader's not going to see it for like 3 or 4 weeks. And
wow.
So it gives you a different perspective on, you want to do something that will still be live 3 weeks from now.
Why so far ahead?
That's just the schedule of the publication.
Is it still a print publication?
It is half the time. It comes out in print 6 times a year, and then in between they'll do an online version.
That's that's kind of cool. I mean, does the print still feel good?
Yeah, and the new designers on the print magazine, it really looks good. I'll have to send you some copies.
Oh yeah, no, I would love to see it. I mean, so let me sort of go through what we're talking about here. Obviously, Donald Trump is his transition team is busily appointing various individuals to various posts. Let's go through some of them.
Various non-entities, you might have said.
Well, that's true. I mean,
I wish they were.
Secretary of Defense designate Pete Hegseth, a person that if he broke into my apartment, I would not have been able to identify through the NYPD and say like, oh, it's the co-host of Fox News Channel's Fox and Friends Weekend.
I'm in Texas, so if he broke in down here, I'd shoot him.
and that would not necessarily be wrong.
Kind of non-entity we're talking about. He said some nice things about Trump on TV, so it makes him qualified to be the head of the largest military establishment in the world.
But hey, it's not like he controls 54% of our federal tax dollars or anything. I
mean, there's 1 million uniformed military people on the planet right now. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say, and I was in the early iteration of this, which was actually awesome, and I'm sorry that none of you guys got to hear it.
Lost to posterity.
Yes, sadly, not really. But I was about to say that the president's entitled to his appointees. He won the election fair and square.
Yeah.
I mean, he's allowed to do this, but but the framers, put in Senate oversight and the consultative process. They weren't supposed to just be a rubber stamp, and I think they're supposed to step in a judicious kind of conservative, small c conservative kind of way, to say at times when someone is just completely not up to the job, and not only are they not up to the job, like Pete Buttigieg. He wasn't qualified, as the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, to run the Department of Transportation. The city of South Bend, Indiana doesn't even have any buses, okay? The buses are run by a local regional transportation authority, and the mayor has no oversight at all. He had no experience.
I had to butt out on that one because he's a friend of my son's.
However, Pete Buttigieg is a very smart man. It took him a couple of years to settle in, and now he is doing a good job. By really anybody who's not super partisan has to, and a lot of those people even have admitted that. He's an impressive guy. But now we're talking about Pete Hegseth, who wasn't even able to excel on Fox News. He's a B-lister on the weekend. Okay, he's a weekend host.
I read an interesting factoid today that apparently he has not washed his hands in 5 years because he doesn't believe in germs.
Oh, well,
wait, is that true?
He's not in charge of Health and Human Services.
I don't know.
That'll be RFK's
it must
job.
Be true.
Well, and also biological warfare. If you don't believe in it, it can't kill you.
That's right.
Or you are the biological warfare. Like he goes.
Would you shake his knowing that if that's true? Knowing that, would you, in all seriousness, would you shake his hand?
No.
I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't.
Hell no.
I'm not a germaphobe. I think the guy's a maniac.
Send him across the trenches into the enemy lines, and he can infect all of them.
Is he romantically partnered? This guy? Well, not very romantic, but is he sexually partnered? It's very strange. Okay, and then I got to pair him up with Kristi Noem, the head of the. She's from South Dakota. She has absolutely no experience whatsoever.
Don't make that sound like it's a disease
in this field.
It's
one accomplishment is shooting her dog, as I recall.
Right, she killed her dog.
Pissed her off.
By the way, this is an inconsistency in Trump world, because Trump, as we all know, Trump is an avid protector of America's cats and dogs against the Haitian hordes.
Even though he has looking to eat dogs.
But apparently you can kill a dog if you're white and hot and from South Dakota and Republican,
and you don't,
but not if you're.
Yes, that's the line we don't cross.
Yeah, it seems to me like once you've killed the dog, you're going to eat that or what? It's like don't let it go to waste.
Don't waste the dog.
But
Comanches wouldn't have wasted it.
So Kristi Noem will be the most attractive Secretary of Homeland Security the nation has yet seen. Well, since Tom Ridge, but he's who I still think of every day. But this first of all, I just want to say parenthetically, this is a department that never should have been created. It's a massive, sprawling, worthless, redundant piece of shit. But it does
all
exist.
The functions it does were being done by other departments.
Yeah, precisely. So, but this is a big department, right? It's a sprawling bureaucracy. She's going to be running the Secret Service, the border, TSA. Kristi, no. So these two, in my view, these two nominees, this won't happen, but Republicans, if they were doing their job in the Senate, would go to the president-elect and say, Mr. President-elect, this is just not good.
Well, that was Mr. Hamilton's point when he, in the Federalist Papers about advice and consent, he said, the president, this is one of the most important things walls we can build around the presidency, is he cannot appoint people into the government or judges without somebody else looking at it, and in the Senate considering it. And Trump, in a way, sort of admits that these are just bullshit appointments when he wants to take away advice and consent. I
have to believe, and paint me naive at this stage, but I have to believe the Senate when Kristi Noem, you can make a case. She's a 2-term governor of an American state, so that presumes some executive.
Sort of.
Right. Well,
they're still at the moment they're still in the
county
union
where I am right now.
But the Secretary of Defense, I mean, this is a joke. This cannot, this, sir, cannot stand.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping against hope that even before confirmation hearings begin, Trump will reconsider. Because
is that what's happening with Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio's up for Secretary of State. There's obviously he has not, with all the other confirmations that have leaked, the president-elect has made a statement praising them on X or on Truth Social. We've seen nothing from him. Is there Linker's remorse happening there? What do you think?
Yeah.
I don't think Rubio would be a terrible choice initially. I actually supported his candidacy in 2016 for the short period of time it lasted, because I thought he is a
warmonger, so there's that problem.
Well, I'm a Republican. We don't mind that.
Make a war.
Well, you guys do mind it now, right? MAGA
now we're the
It's Pat Buchanan's world now.
Yes,
right.
I can't listen. I joke, but I was never. I take that back. The Iraq invasion I supported, which was a huge mistake on my part. But for the most part, I like the anti-war plank and the anti-war view of. It's one of the few things about Donald Trump I can say I actually like and actually respect it. But you've had worse choices or you could have worse choices for Secretary of State. I don't think Rubio is the catastrophe these other people are. I think Miller being the deputy, that's interesting that he's only deputy chief of staff, in that, he had served in that role before. And Trump clearly feels that the guy who, if you go to central casting for the Gestapo agent, probably should be the face of the administration.
Am I wrong not to care? Am I wrong not to care about the deputy chief of staff? I'm like, I figure that's just like, if he wasn't appointed to the job, he'd still be on speed dial. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's true.
But the way the White House, go ahead.
Kind of guy that even though he's the deputy chief of staff, he's going to reach in there and say, "We're going to do this and this and this." I mean, he's that kind of guy. I mean, he's really frightening. In some ways, because Trump is just a bitter, childish, old, deteriorating 78-year-old man. There are some ways that Trump is not really the problem. It's the guys coming over the side of the ship with knives in their teeth that are really the problem.
Well, and that was the question we posed before we were having the technical difficulty. So I'll pose it again. Is Trump an actual threat, not existential, but an actual threat to American democracy in America in general? And Ben, you had an answer to that. I'll ask it again. I apologize for repeating myself.
Yes, I think he is, because he has no regard or any knowledge that I know of the Constitution, the laws, our traditions, the whole concept of our government and our society. I mean, he is completely pathologically narcissistic, and anything he thinks about is just whatever makes him feel good right at that moment. I mean, his role models are John Gotti and Roy Cohn. So, I think he is an existential threat, because he doesn't grasp what our government is about.
Ted, you disagree. And now Ted's frozen.
He's sitting very still.
He's just shocked by our answers. Oh my God.
That has never happened in all the years I've known Ted.
I know. No, he's never been speechless. That's just something Ted is never.
Yeah, I'm having a few. You guys keep the convo going a little bit, because I'm having a few. Oh, here we go. All right, everything.
Yeah, you're back. Okay. You're a little pixelated, but you're at least synced.
I blame Trump, as I will blame him for all things going forward. So let's talk a little bit about some of these other choices. I think we don't have to talk about White House counsel William McGinley. I mean, that's his lawyer, whatever. John Ratcliffe, CIA director. I figure as long as you don't have Gina Haspel, who was CIA director, who was actually herself a torturer. She didn't even outsource the torturing. She got her own hands dirty. She's like, I love torture. It's awesome for me. I figure the bar's so low now that, like, pretty much, all right, it's you got a human being. And so, okay, that's fine. This guy's a human being.
Hey, Ted, who is it for a UN ambassador? What was?
Oh my God! So it's Elise Stefanik is going to be, who's literally least diplomatic human being in the world. Is going to go to the most important diplomatic job that the United States has in the diplomatic corps.
Yeah.
At least Stefanik. I mean,
She's as
she's
qualified
horrible.
to do that as I am to be the Bishop of Rome. I mean, she's
disgusting.
she's
She's
awful.
such a
Tell the listeners why.
well. So Elise Stefanik is the person who she's our new Joseph McCarthy. She's the one who basically
I'd buy that.
subjected those Ivy League college presidents to that just absolutely unspeakable horror show of hearings about supposed anti-Semitism during the pro Gaza.
Oh, you mean she had the
last
temerity
spring.
to ask them questions? Good.
Well, she didn't let them answer them.
Unforgivable.
She didn't let them answer them was a big problem. And she was a bully. She was a thug. Never mind that the whole premise of the hearing is absolutely false. I mean, there's literally no evidence whatsoever of anti-Semitism in any of these protests. You know, I mean, and just the definitions are crazy. Like if you said from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, America will be free. Is that, I don't know, anti-Protestant? Is that anti-Catholic? Is that anti-American?
Yeah, that is so far away from a reasonable comparison.
It's
from
language.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That means
Right.
get rid of Israel. That means kill
That's
Jews.
right. Yeah,
It
that's
does not mean
code
that.
language for getting rid of the Jewish state.
It's like you could say it's code, but like if people are reading the language literally, I mean, and
They're
also,
not.
well, they were 19-year-old college students who were not around when Hamas was founded. Okay, and by the way, Hamas got rid of their desire to get rid of Israel from their talking points years ago. So I mean, yes, there was this attack. Yes, there's a war. I don't want to litigate all that. All I can say is, no matter how you feel about the Israel-Hamas conflict, Elise Stefanik is a thug. She's a bully. She's a mook. She's a goon. And she wasn't there. She wasn't interested in uncovering truth, which is the purpose of a congressional hearing, to gain and collect information, to try to arrive at a conclusion and maybe some actions that are important. She had a preset agenda. She called these idiots onto the carpet who were foolish enough to show up and then just reamed them. And you know, and all of academia is still reeling as a result in this country. I mean, it's one of the most disgusting episodes I've seen.
Yeah, like you said, it was reminiscent of McCarthy. I mean, it was. Well, it's okay because the Middle East situation will be solved by sending Mike Huckabee over as the American ambassador to Israel.
Yeah. Who's a self-described Zionist.
He also wants the river to the sea, but it would be Israel from the river.
Yeah,
to
he has no problems
That's
with the settlements. He has no problems with reacquiring Gaza.
He said there's no
also,
such thing as an occupation.
And don't forget, he's also a rock rib Baptist who believes that the rapture's on its way, and if we can help it along, we probably should. Now, folks, if you've ever read the Bible, and read the last chapter, things don't end well for us.
No,
it's not a good moment for humanity, and for these assholes to continue to say we really want to bring this on. You're just going
right. Well,
it's like that Johnny Depp movie. It's like that Johnny Depp movie, The Ninth Gate. Like you're not supposed to open the ninth gate.
Right, exactly. they want the Jews to return to Israel because that will bring on the rapture, and then our Lord will appear and send all the Jews to hell. So,
right,
it's an interesting program they have in mind.
It is an interesting program indeed. And then also, speaking of the Middle East, we have Stephen Whitnock, who's a special envoy. He's a 67-year-old golfer who golfs with Trump. Apparently, he was there. And a real estate investor.
We can get everything solved.
Yeah. So, well, I guess, Jared Kushner left the job less than 100% finished. Let's just say that. So now we're the golfer is going. Look, by far the most interesting and bizarre thing is the spectacle of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are both going to be heads of a new cabinet level department of government efficiency.
That doesn't exist. And
right.
They've been appointed to jobs that don't exist.
So they're going to
can't unless for congressional approval. This isn't an easy thing to do.
Well, they created the Department of Homeland Security. Why can't they create the Department of Government?
That was a national emergency. That at the time made some sense. But they, other than that, he's. I mean, what they're going to say?
Scott, I would have thought you would have liked this. You're a deficit hawk.
Oh, I am. But these assholes. How many times have we? Ben, you and I started at roughly. My first job was in 1981. We started roughly the same era. How many of these have there been in our lifetime of a presidential,
at least
blue ribbon commission?
Right, 1 or 2 for each president.
Minimum.
Get a commission together, and they're going to figure out where all the inefficiencies are, what we need to do, and then they just put it on a shelf and it disappears.
Al Gore spent his entire vice presidency working on government.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Let me throw in some history here. The only time anything like this has ever worked in the history of the 20th or 21st century was Calvin Coolidge. Every morning would sit down with his Treasury Secretary and they'd go over the budget, the federal budget, line by line, which was considerably less than it is today, as you might imagine. But they'd go through it line by line for an hour to an hour and a half every day. They did find enough. They were able to cut enough to actually pay for, let's say this together, kids, and a collective gasp, pay for a tax cut. I know.
Well, it helped that the economy was booming and tax revenue.
The economy was booming, tax revenues were going up, but the fact of the matter is, I've told that to numerous people, and I can't tell you, Ben, Ted, how many of them have said, I don't want my president doing that. I'm going, that is precisely what I want my president to be doing, because then he can't get us into, wars or, do untoward things with interns.
Well, there's always time. But I mean, so Scott, I'm just trying to hear, I understand you. Are you telling me that this rubber stamp MAGA Senate and House that we're going to have are not going to sign off on a new bureaucracy to stamp out bureaucracy, a Department of Government Efficiency that is going to be so efficient that it has not 1, but 2 cabinet officials, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, in charge of it. It's going to be a sprawling government bureaucracy to combat bureaucracy. I mean, it is hilarious.
You're right. You're right. And the name of it, I think it'll pass for 2 things. First of all, because Trump wants it and the MAGA forces in the Senate and the House will say, okay. But 2, the name, it's so Orwellian that they're going to go, how can you,
and oxymoronic.
Can you imagine running against, or like you're up for re-election in 2 years, you're a congressman or you're a senator who's up for re-election. You voted against establishing the Department of Efficiency. How dare you?
Yeah. It's like the most.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It is
Scott Stantis, pro-inefficiency.
The Ministry of Love, and I forget the other ministries that were in 1980.
Truth.
All had sort of backward
truth
names. Yeah, the Ministry of Truth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's totally true, right? I mean, the government. I mean, I also wonder. First of all, and this is a serious question. Should people who are worth billions of dollars are they really the best judge of how to be miserly and careful with money? I think not.
Scott was just saying that Andrew Mellon, the Elon Musk of his day, was sitting down in the White House every day and going over the budget.
Well, that's a fair point.
Be.
No, of course they should.
I would think someone who grew up poor, who's had to try to get scraped by from month to month, probably has a sharper eye with the green eye shade to be looking over the budget and being like, I don't know if we need that bridge.
Down in this part of the country, a lot of election times, we need businessmen to run the government.
Yeah,
right. I said, no, we don't. That's 2 different things.
Yeah,
very different. And there's business. They have 2 different functions. Mm-hmm. The job of a businessman, of a corporate executive, is to make the maximum amount of return for his shareholders. The job of a government official is to most efficiently deliver goods and services to the people of the state or of the nation.
I also want to point out that
different things.
Something that I know you guys, as you guys both know, I love to be a bummer. And so let me really bring the bummer on.
Did you know that, Scott?
Oh,
he knows that. So we also, I don't know if you've seen the Kiefer Sutherland show where he's the designated survivor, where he's, there's a nuclear attack on the Capitol.
I never did see it. Yeah.
Well, there's an attack, a terrorist attack on the Capitol during a joint session of Congress. The Secretary of Education, played by a hapless Kiefer Sutherland, is inexplicably becomes president of the United States, even though he's like number whatever 9 or 12 or something.
Well, yeah, he's
Elon
like
Musk
Secretary of Education.
Elon Musk will be in the line of succession to the presidency of the United States of America. There's my bummer.
Oh my God. Oh, that is a bummer. Oh my God.
I think you would have a case in federal district court to say that Elon Musk was not born in the United States.
Oh, good point.
Oh, right. He's not a natural born citizen.
In the original text of the Constitution.
Yeah, so
well, thank you for saving us from President President Musk.
The first few presidents were all born subjects of the British Crown.
Right. Yeah. How did they get around that? I don't remember.
The first one who wasn't was
Fillmore. Millard Fillmore.
Was he? Why did I think it was
our finest president?
I could be wrong. I thought Fillmore was the first native-born president. United States citizen born.
Ted, you're frozen. Just a heads up, you are very frozen.
All right, I'll try to fix
it's nice. You're smiling, which is nice. This will be the last thing I see when you thrust in the knife. That's better. It's not. God, that's crazy. Is New York under attack? I mean, what's going on over there? I mean, we're here in red country. We're fine. Ben and I look great.
We're just fine.
Hey, Ben, let me ask you if I could just double back and talk about your career and so on. I mean, you started in 1984, and I want to qualify this. When I started in the business, I was looking to be anyone but, because at that time, back in 1981, I got my first staff job. Everyone was like McNally, everyone was being like Peters, and great cartoonists, funny. And Jeff was a singular genius. It's so funny, when I took the job at the Chicago Tribune, I didn't hear it a lot because it was 9 years after he'd passed away. But when I did hear it, people say, "You're no Jeff McNally," and I was the first one to go, "You're absolutely right."
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I couldn't be. But looking at your work and the influences that you drew from, I mean, I was using you and some of the other Canadian cartoonists, McPherson, especially Roy Peterson. Who are your influences, artistic influences?
Gee, I'm not sure, because I just kind of fell into this job. I didn't start out to be a cartoonist. I was
explain that.
Yeah, okay. I was a reporter for several different employers here in Austin, and was a reporter there at the Statesman. And some other reporter wanted me to do a little illustration for a column he was writing, and I did. And then somebody else said, "Oh, can you do one of those for me?" And so I started doing a few drawings on the side for the paper. And I left the paper, went to work for UPI down at the Capitol. And after a couple of years, they came back and said, "Do you want to come over and draw full time?" And it's something I hadn't thought about, but I said, "Well, yeah, I'm kind of a half-assed reporter. Let's give this a shot." I went back in. At the time, I was the only artist in the building, so I was doing little maps and graphs and stuff like that. And but I had always loved editorial cartoons, and I asked the editor one day if I could do some, and he said, "Yeah, knock yourself out," And the cartoons he was using back in those days, he said, you couldn't be any worse than these are. so
do you remember what he was using?
Huh?
Do you remember what he was using?
I can't remember. Probably if I went back and looked in a cartoon history book, I could find, but they were not stellar cartoons. But yeah, so I started doing them, and after a pretty short time, I wound up, that was all I was doing. So I went,
So the Austin American-Statesman had no history of editorial cartooning up to that point?
It had one. The only one we've ever been able to find, there was a guy, now I'm forgetting his name, who was there for a few years, like in the mid-40s. But other than that, no, there was nobody who had drawn.
I had no idea. So you started to draw. I mean, you obviously always like to draw. That's the one common thread most cartoonists have, but you had not. That's shocking that you had never done that as a profession.
Yeah.
What were your influences then? I mean, you know who your work reminds me of too is the underground cartoonist Cobb, COBB.
Yeah.
same kind of the cross hatching, the very
Oh
structured.
yeah, thanks. That's a high compliment indeed.
It is.
Yeah, that may be what I'd want to point to, because that was an era when we had been reading underground comics, and they were very popular in Austin, of course. We had some of the great ones down here. We had Gilbert Shelton and Jim Franklin and people like that, and probably I had some influences from them. And then there's the cross hatching. I always tell people that when I was a kid, my parents had a big book that was a book of engravings from Harper's Weekly from the 19th century. And I used to just pore over that, and I just loved it. And of course, because they were wood engravings, they were all cross hatched.
Sure.
So that's cool.
Oh, that's great. No, because I fell in love with, my family had collections of Daumier and those lithographs, and I fell in love with that and always tried to kind of copy that.
That comes out in your work, I think. I hadn't thought of that connection, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it was always a big influence, but having those weird influences, because you didn't draw like everybody else, did you face any kind of headwinds in your, especially when you got to be syndicated?
Yeah. No, I think it may have helped. I mean, that Lee Salem told me that one time when I went over to Universal. He said, we really like getting your cartoons in the mix because they don't look like anybody else's.
Well, he was unusual.
At the time we were coming up, they wanted everybody to draw like McNally and Peters. And
Lee Salem was, for people who wouldn't know, which is 99.99% of people listening to the podcast.
Yeah,
it was the late syndicate head of Universal Press Syndicate. Basically, there are a half a dozen major syndicates, of which Universal, which now has a different name, AMU, or AMS, I should say, is one of them. And so we've all been through Universal. And Lee Salem was famous because he didn't like stuff that looked like everybody else's. That wasn't true about many other syndicate executives. Right. They kind of wanted everything to look the same.
He was a genius.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
And I remember I was on a panel for the features editors conference in New Orleans, and afterwards he said, let's go drink and talk.
And that's Lee Salem.
And we did both late into the evening, and it was just a delight because I mean he was so smart, and talking politics to him, and our politics were very, very different.
Yeah.
It was. Well, let me ask you, Ben. I mean, this is a broader question. Then we can get out of we're kind of going into the deep weeds here on editorial cartooning. But you came up when editorial cartoons, and many of them were very, very liberal. Jeff McNally being contrary, but he was more kind of a squishy conservative, really. Although behind closed doors, he was much more strident. Why do cartoonists then and now tend to be of the left? Why not of? I mean, and I've heard all the insults, so you can't really throw any more at me.
What, the truth has a liberal bias?
Well, you guys have been around long enough to remember when at the AAEC convention, we would always wrap it up with a softball game, and we would divide up different ways, sometimes north and south, east and west. One time we decided to do liberals versus conservatives.
There were three.
We had to give the conservatives some players. I don't know. I think it's because cartooning, of all the different media that are used to convey opinion, is one of the most subversive and media, and it just kind of it's a medium that you use to attack things, tear them down, rather than preserving the status quo. And I mean,
although that doesn't seem to be, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I've taken note with some alarm and dismay that over the past 4 years, many of our colleagues, most of whom are Democrats, they just couldn't really bring themselves to really make fun of Joe Biden. And mostly if they tended to focus on Trump, or they would criticize people who were criticizing Biden. Right. But I feel like that's not the job.
I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're right. And maybe it's just because he's an old man. You didn't want to beat up.
Well, I mean, it definitely felt like a lot of cartoonists were in the tank for him. And And I don't feel like a cartoonist should be in the tank for anyone.
For
ever.
anybody. No, that's true. That needs to be one of the first rules, is that you're independent.
And that's just not the case. And I'm starting to see it happen again where, there's a pretty well-known left-wing commentator. He works for the New Yorker it's like he's back at like basically making fun making fun of Fox for making fun of Biden. And it's kind of like, it's not that there's any rules. I mean, you're allowed to do that by all means. I mean,
right.
Fox News, I mean, it's a fat target. But I mean, really, truly, I mean, like, where's the MSNBC cartoons? You know, I mean, it's which is just as silly in its own way. I mean, one of the things that came out in a lot of the exit polling and the focus groups from people who were on the fence about voting for Harris versus Trump was that a lot of people who voted for Trump felt that they had been lied to, that they'd had their intelligence insulted by the media and by the Democratic Party, insisting that Joe Biden was mentally sharp, up to the job, no problem, he can run again, everything's cool. And then obviously that wasn't true. And so the credibility is like in the toilet. I mean, even in today's New York Times, they have that wrap up of that focus group that they've been doing all throughout the season. And I was really struck by some comments against the New York Times by the focus groupers, where they were talking about, like, you know, how, for example, fairly recently, right before the election, Trump had a screed where he said, well, you know, how would Liz Cheney like it if she had guns pointing at her? And it's like, she wouldn't like it. She's a warmonger. It's really easy to declare a war from your climatized office in DC. And these were young people, young voters who said, you know, that tipped me over. I was like, fuck them. That's not hostile language. It's not threatening language. The New York Times says it is, but they know it's not. And they're lying. And I will not countenance their lie by supporting their candidate. I mean, it seems like, you know, cartoonists, unfortunately, in our weakened but still our bully pulpit, a lot of us have been feeding into that kind of bullshit.
Well, part of the problem is that we kind of have two complete different ecosystems in the country politically. And, you know, if you were on the Harris side, on the left side, on the Democratic side, you couldn't imagine how anybody could even consider voting for Trump, because he's just so awful and the people around him are worse. And yet he won. And I was reading today about an interesting piece. I hadn't read it yet, but it's going to be in the upcoming Atlantic Monthly by a guy named Charlie Warzel, where he says that he makes that point. He said that the political ecosystem that surrounds Trump, they are, you know, they don't have any particular policies or principles, morality, or philosophy that guides them in their political views. They just like kicking ass and taking names. They just want to. They get primal affirmation by being annoying, you know. And I think, and like you said, they feel like they're being talked down to, so they kick back. And it's not that they have any particular program, therefore, it's just that they want to be assholes. And these are the ones who, you know, you can say they don't want to hear, I have a program here that we can pay for to help you get your first house. And instead they want to hear, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. You know, so it's, and I think a lot of that comes from one of the biggest problems we have in American politics right now, which is the way people get information. It's completely exploded. And I think that showed up this year in the election, that, you know, you can go through the day reading and hearing only stuff you agree with. And that is very dangerous. You know, the ways we receive information now just become completely atomized, and there's no good, reliable, common sources of information that people can rely on, and people can be speaking to each other from a common ground of knowledge. I think that's part of what happened this year.
Mhm.
But don't you think that, Ben, that the mainstream media is partially, at least largely, responsible for that? First off, because they've eaten their young, I mean, and their staffs are so much smaller, and now they're showing studies that I believe this was the New York Times, wasn't it, that came out and said that the positive news stories each night on the nightly news and on the New York Times and the Washington Post, 75% positive for Kamala Harris, 85% negative for Donald Trump. All right, listen, I'm no Trump. I want to be very clear. I'm not a Trump admirer by any stretch. I've always been a never Trump Republican and always will be.
True.
But looking at the mainstream media, I think that they have some responsibility for their own diminishment.
No, I agree. I mean, newspaper management and, network management.
Sorry.
Yeah, no kidding. Has simply failed in maintaining some kind of a media ecosystem that gives people, say,
it seems to me like a lot of the post.
We all were hearing and reading the same news, and so we had grounds for debating that with each other.
Well, and also there was more of a robust debate, like within each newspaper. For example, on the editorial page of a typical American newspaper, you probably would get far left, centrist, and far right, opinion essays and cartoons, all jostling and competing for attention. But they've become increasingly homogenized. I mean, there's a zillion things that have gone wrong with the media, with the news media. But I keep thinking that after 2016 and Trump's surprise win, it led a lot of institutions like the Washington Post to create solutions that made things worse. I'm thinking, for example, of the fact checking. We're going to create all these fact checking organizations and columnists. We're going to count the number of lies that Donald Trump told. We're going to editorialize within the news section. We'll say, Donald Trump repeating his repeatedly debunked lies about election interference or whatever, but not only doing it to him, not doing it when a Democrat does it. They never say, Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton repeatedly debunked lies about Russian interference in American elections or whatever. They don't say that. They don't do that. And so the public was noticing, and it turns out, and they didn't like it. And I think, a lot of swing voters, that just tipped them over. I mean, in a two-party system where people don't think a third or a fourth party is viable, all you can do to say fuck you is to vote for the party that is currently out of power. So that's why we keep flailing back and forth.
Yeah, maybe something to that.
Okay.
All right, Ben. I think that's a good place to end this, honey. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Really,
Ben, thank you for putting up with our technical.
Well, and you're putting up with my technical. See, I started out, I was on my phone. I'm on my computer now, but I was on my phone, and I got it set up, and I was talking and everything, and then it said low power, 10%. So I had to run off and get a cord for the phone.
Oh, man.
I couldn't get it to start up again. So,
all right, Ben.
But
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on, Ted. I think this is great. Scott, it's great to see you, and great to see both you guys.
All right, let me take Ben out. Ben Sargent is the Texas Observer's longtime cartoonist. He launched his career drawing editorial cartoons for the Austin American-Statesman back in 1974. He won the Pulitzer Prize, I've heard of that, for editorial cartooning in 1982. He's also received awards from Women in Communications Incorporated, Common Cause of Texas, and Cox newspapers. He's the author of Texas State House Blues and Big Brother Blues. Those are both books for people who remember those.
Ink on paper. Very cool.
Yes, awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. See you later.
Thank you, guys. All right. See you soon.
So that was fun. I mean, it's like, thank God people didn't see how the sausage was made too much.
Not too much.
I pixelated a little bit, but that wasn't the end of the world.
What is that? What's going on? I mean, why? I mean, we'll be talking and just chugging along, and all of a sudden I'll look at your image and you're just like, 6 pixels.
Well, I'm having a hard time figuring that out, and our producer and I have tried to troubleshoot it. I tested my connection, and basically what it seems to be is that streaming takes up a lot of bandwidth, and so perversely, If you run it on a big desktop, like I have a big, fancy, massive desktop, the size, my desktop is so huge. It's the biggest desktop. It has all the, so anyway, it's massive. And apparently that perversely it does so much that it gets in the way of the streaming. So I'm doing this on the laptop, which I kind of hate because I get that angle thing. I'm going to fix that angle thing soon. But, I think it has something to do with that. I am this close from, I think I'm going to call the cable company and have them come over and test the line. I mean, we're in New York City. I mean, in all seriousness, a rat could be chewing on the cable. Anything's possible.
Well, try this when we get off. Write this down. Speedtest.net.
I did it.
Oh, and you're cool. You're good.
It's like a rocket. Yeah, no, it's like.
Of course it is.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
All right.
And, this is like one of the. It's a mystery wrapped in enigma, wrapped in bullshit.
Well, when we all go to the camps, I hope the internet's better there. That's the one thing that I'm keeping my fingers crossed that when we're all, being re-educated, that
yes,
when we get Trump's little red book, that at least it'll be on like a tablet that has fast internet.
Right.
I'm just saying.
All right. So
that's the end of the thought.
So we're going to show our little our little outro thing with where you can find all your stuff. But Scott, tell us where we can find all of your stuff.
Go to gocomics.com/Scott Stantis, one word, or go to gocomics.com/Prickly City and see my political comic strip. You can go to the Chicago Tribune and see my work there. You can go to the Dallas Morning News, see my work there. You can also go to smirkonish.com and see the work I draw for him and his CNN show. And Ted and I are also involved in Center Clip, which is an app that we are really like. You can do mini podcasts, 30 seconds, no longer than 5 minutes. And we can verbally and audially, if that's a word, respond to breaking news. we can respond to breaking news, which I love because, for obvious reasons, you can literally and immediately respond. You can find this on Newsweek. We're also with allsides.com. So Ted, where can we see all things Ted Rallian?
Well, you can start at raw.com. Please subscribe to this show, whether you're watching it on YouTube or on Rumble. If you're listening to it via an RSS feed on audio, you're probably already subscribed, so I don't need to tell you that. But it's very important please support us because that's going to make this viable going forward. You can also go to whowhatwhy.org. I have a Monday through Friday show, another show called the TMI Show with Manila Chan. That also streams on YouTube and Rumble, 10 a.m. Eastern time, except when we're not there, but we're usually there. Scott's been a guest. Scott will be a guest again. And you can also, Center Clip, all that jazz. Please buy my most recent book, 2024 Revisited. I have a book that came out in 2020 that I think might be pertinent for people. It kind of like blinked and you missed it because it happened during the pandemic. It's called Political Suicide, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. And it's about how the Democratic Party fucked itself by pushing out progressives and consistently, not just Bernie Sanders. This goes back decades to the 1970s. Goes to names like Scoop Jackson and people like that. So go and check that out on Amazon.
You make fun of Scoop?
I'm not making fun of Scoop. I'm criticizing Scoop. I'm exhuming his grave and then shooting him back in the head and putting him back in there with a stake through the heart the way he deserves.
Oh my God. Those of us of a certain age remember Scoop Jackson, senator from Washington, correct?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah, Washington State.
Well, it's a better nickname than Scooter. That's all I have to say for Mr.
Sure.
Libby. All right, we're going to let that go, and we're going to play our cute outro. Thanks, everyone. We will probably see you on Friday-ish.
Yes.
If not Friday, probably Friday. I don't know.
Probably.
Is Friday good for you? I could do
Sure.
Friday.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
can do it.
Friday. All right.
Okay.
There it is.
Friday it is.
Bye, everyone. See you later.